Now that we're done with indirect taxes, we're going to talk about subsidies. What are subsidies? Well, subsidies are kind of like opposite to indirect taxes because subsidies are a per unit payment by the government to the firm in order to, number one, lower their cost and therefore the market price. Number two, increase production and consumption of the good because now the good is affordable for consumers. And number three, also helping the firm to make some revenues. What we will see through the diagram that the subsidy will result in the supply curve to shift to the right, making the price of the good to go down and the quantity to go up. A government can grant subsidy for many reasons. First reason why it grants a subsidy could be because they want to make a particular good cheaper for consumers, and so by giving subsidies you are basically making it affordable for lower households. So, for example, if you look at uh, necessities like food items, sometimes subsidies are given because they want to make sure that it is affordable for poor income households. Healthcare goods and education are merit goods, and they come into this category where the government is making it sure that by giving subsidies, they're making it affordable for poor income households who will otherwise will not be able to afford the good. So the first category of goods that get subsidies are what we call merit goods. Another category where government is granting subsidy could be when they want to expand output and consumption of products that are environmentally friendly, which means we're looking at now something called goods that have positive externality, such as, for example, hybrid cars, or could be goods such as solar panels that can reduce pollution in the environment. We also saw that farmers get a lot of subsidies in the earlier videos, and that's because that's one group where the government may feel that the producers are earning lower income, and therefore there is a support that is required to them in terms of payments from the government in order to make sure that they do not leave the industry and make sure that the output doesn't go below a certain level. Lastly, subsidies are also given in the international market because sometimes you want to make sure that domestic producers become more competitive to foreign producers, the imported goods. So, subsidy can make that happen. And also, sometimes a subsidy is given in order to make a particular good cheaper against the foreign goods in the international market. So, for example, cotton producers in the US are given a lot of subsidies in order to make them more competitive in the foreign market. So these are some of the reasons why subsidy is given. Let's now look at how the equilibrium price and quantity will change and who benefits after subsidy by looking at its diagram. Let's look at the consequence of subsidy on a demand and supply. Let's say this is demand and supply of a good. For example, government is giving subsidies to schools, and currently the market price is P naught and the quantity is Q naught. When the subsidy is given to the good, the supply curve will shift to the right in a parallel manner, and this will result in the price of the good to go down to, for example, P1 and the quantity to rise to Q1. So, as you can see, the subsidy is making the good to be affordable and the quantity bought is going up. So, that's the first advantage also that we can see of subsidy making the good more affordable for consumers. But do producers also benefit? And the answer is yes. And the way we figure it out is first we look at how much is the amount of subsidy given and who is benefiting by how much. In order to see that, we need to look at the subsidy at the given quantity. So at quantity Q1, the amount of subsidy given will be this vertical distance. So let's see this. This vertical distance AB is the amount of subsidy given. So for example, if the price was P naught, the total subsidy will be basically P2 minus P1. So let's do some numbers. Let's say P naught is $10, right? And the government gives a subsidy of $4. If the subsidy is $4, the price will not be falling to 6, But because the demand curve is not perfectly inelastic, the price has gone down to, for example, $8. While consumers are paying only $8, the $4 subsidy, so 8 plus 4 will mean producers are getting 12 in the end. 8 from the consumer, 4 from the government, making it 12. So in this case, you can see this that both consumers and producer are benefiting because the price has gone down from 10 to 8 for the consumers, while for producers they were getting 10 before and now they're getting 12. Let's label these areas to understand consumer and producer surplus. So let's call this area 1, 2 and 3. Let's call this triangle 4, this triangle 5, this as 6 and 7. And look at the situation before and after subsidy. So before subsidy was given, the price was P naught and the quantity was Q naught, and the consumer surplus was area 1 and 2, because area under the demand curve above the market price is area 1 and 2, while producer surplus was area 6 plus 7, as the price was P naught and the supply curve was S. So you're looking at 6 and 7 as the producer surplus. But after subsidy, now your price is P1 and the quantity is Q1. So what's our consumer surplus? Our consumer surplus will be all this area under the demand curve above the price P1, which means 1 plus 2 plus 5 plus 6. So consumers are benefiting in terms of extra surplus of 5 and 6, as you can see from the diagram, because the price has gone down for them. Producers, on the other hand, are also benefiting because now they are getting a price of P2 for that quantity Q1 that they're making. So the producer surplus will now be equal to area 2 plus 3 plus 6 plus 7, which means they are also getting this additional benefit of area 2 plus 3, because now the after subsidy price for them is better for the quantity Q1 they make. But if you look closely, there is also this area 4. What is this area 4? Well, we say this area 4 is basically the amount of subsidy which is being paid by the government but did not come to both the consumer and producer. In other words, this is what we call a social welfare or efficiency loss that happens because the cost of the subsidy is more than the benefit. Now, how do I figure out the cost of the subsidy? Well, the cost of the subsidy is subsidy amount per unit times the quantity. So what's the subsidy amount per unit? And the answer is it's P2 minus P1 times the new quantity Q1, or in other words, area 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6. As you can see, 2 and 3 are going to the producers. So I'm going to color that with that color. 2 and 3 is that going to producers, and 5 and 6 are going to consumers in terms of lower prices, right? And area 4 is basically going to nobody, and that is why area 4 is what we call our social welfare loss, as the cost of the subsidy is higher than the benefit. Let's now look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of subsidies. So, well, the first advantage of subsidy is that just like indirect taxes, subsidies also use the market forces, demand supply, to alter production. If I want to, as government, encourage the production of any good or consumption of any good, I just need to give a subsidy to the producer and the price will go down, the quantity to be bought will go up. Secondly, subsidies are less costly to government in comparison with directly providing a good. So, for example, if there is a vaccine producer, the government will give subsidy to it so that it can make it affordable for the producer and therefore consumers to produce that good. On the other hand, if the government itself makes it, then they need to buy a plant, set up a plant, and it will be very costly to increase the supply in that case. The third advantage is that subsidy also allow local producers to reduce their cost of production, and then producers can use this as money for investment in new production methods and production development, which means the advantage of subsidies could be the producers will have more finance available to conduct research and development, which could be good for consumers in terms of variety and better quality of products. The disadvantages of subsidies are also many. Well, number one is the fact that there is an opportunity cost associated with the subsidy, as government is spending money on subsidizing goods instead of spending the money elsewhere, like for example building schools or infrastructure. So there's always an opportunity cost in terms of money spent on goods that are subsidized versus other choices the government has. Secondly, the subsidy is also less effective when the demand for a good is inelastic. If the government wants to increase the quantity of a good to be consumed, when the good is inelastic, the price will fall by much more, but the quantity may not rise by that much because the good is already very price inelastic. Thirdly, subsidies might increase inefficiency as producers, when given subsidies for a very long period of time, can become complacent. They may start relying too much on it, and as a result, may not do their own efforts to reduce their cost of production. Another important point to consider is whether subsidies are passed on to the consumers or not. Subsidies will only be beneficial if producers are passing it on to consumers. What if producers do not pass on the lower prices to consumers? Let's say schools are given subsidies and they do not reduce the fee for the students, which means that the government may need to, in such a case, allocate more resources in order to police and administer whether firms are properly lowering their price after subsidy or not. Lastly, subsidies are paid out of tax revenue, which means that we will have more taxation to happen on taxpayers. So the tax burden will go up, which is also something we need to consider, as there is a disincentive effect of higher taxes on people's efficiency.